Beyond the Fence Line, a podcast brought to you by the Texas Agricultural Land Trust. Created by landowners for landowners, we're proud to play a role in conserving the Texas legacy of wide open spaces.
Hi, I'm Sandra Velarde, and I lead our fundraising efforts here at TALT. Gifts that are given to TALT stay right here in Texas, protecting open space that will be here for generations to come. Giving to TALT means investing in communities, clean water, and clean air that benefit us all. Please consider a small recurring donation today and be part of that movement that is keeping Texas big, wide, and open. Visit our website to learn more at www.txaglandtrust.org/support.
Well, welcome back to Beyond the Fence Line. I'm Chad Ellis, the CEO of Texas Agricultural Land Trust. And this is going to be a very insightful episode for our listeners because I'm joined today by TALT's very own David Crow. And David is our current chair here at TALT, and I really appreciate David's leadership and insight and really helping, steer our ship here at TALT. He's a landowner himself and a rancher, and he's just an outstanding individual that really understands the importance of our working lands and has a very much passion as myself to our working lands, especially the day-to-day across operations of our working lands. And he's going to talk to us today about where we've been these past months and some of the recent wins we've had here at TALT, and even where we're going to go and looking ahead to our organization. So again, welcome, David, for joining us.
Thanks, Chad. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, thank you. And, before we really jump in talking about TALT, let's really start with you and your history and your passion. And one thing I love about your leadership here at TALT is your breadth of knowledge and on our working lands and across the state. And I think it's really important, your insight and what you bring as a rancher and your insight to the board. So tell us about your background and your ranching operation.
Okay, I'll try to be brief here because I really think that we have a lot of important things to talk about besides just me, but I'll give everybody kind of just a general background knowledge. I'm a first generation rancher. I was raised in Corpus. I think the ranching seed or agricultural seed was planted in me when I was a young teenager, and I was sent to my aunt's ranch in Colorado for a couple different summers, and they were a working ranch, cow-calf operation. And well, I say I worked, I was probably more in the way there than I worked, but I was fascinated by it. I absolutely loved it. I didn't want to come home. It was my cup of tea. But I think that's where the seed was planted, if you want to know the truth. But then fast forward about 15, 20 years, and I was in our family businesses, and I was running them, and I had the opportunity to sell them. So I did, and we started buying ranch land. And over about a 20-year period, we've put together these ranches, and it's morphed into Crow Ranches, which is now operates 4 ranches in South Texas and 1 in far West Texas. We're a cow-calf operation, and spend most of my time on these ranches, along with my son now, who is my partner, and I'm thrilled over that. And we do a cow-calf operation with a little bit of stocker operation when it permits.
Yeah, it's amazing story, I think, and it's funny how we just fall in our passions, right, in life in general, and I love to hear your story. And one is love to see that passion also move into your son and his passion for the land and conservation and ag production is really awesome. And I think part of it is not only did you stumble into where you are today, but you kind of your stumbling onto TALT was, I think, unique as well. Early on, like many other Texas landowners, you may not have probably saw the easement tool or conservation easements as a friendly tool or concept. So love to kind of hear your thoughts and how you've evolved over the years.
That's really interesting because it did evolve over, I can remember at a cattle raisers meeting, don't ask me what year, but I guess it was in the mid 80s to early 90s, somewhere in there, where, that's when the conversation of conservation easements started. And being in that meeting, and I remember there were a lot of mad people in there, claiming this is a land grab. And I kept thinking, wait a minute, the people that were presenting this, these were people that I trusted and valued their opinion. They're not, presenting us with a land grab. I think it's more of a case of people not understanding the concept of conservation easements. And so what I did is I just started doing my own research on it and realized that, it's a voluntary deal. How can a land grab be a voluntary deal? And, it's negotiated. And it just kept growing from there. Once again, planted the seed in me on the opportunities that a landowner has and the tools in the toolbox. And that's where this pretty much started with me, is just going to these meetings and discovering what conservation easements are and getting the true facts on them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, David. And I say this all the time. I sure appreciate Blair, Fitzsimmons and her and the kind of the mount, that founding members and board of really looking at the easement and developing this easement tool. It was developed by producers for producers, and you mentioned it. There's not a one size fits all. Each easement is tailor made for that family, right, and their goals and objective. And but I still think even today, we're starting 14 years strong, but we still have a lot of, I think, miscommunication or folks that still feel the same. And I guess the question I have for you is how do we engage with our other ranchers and other landowners across the state? The tool is a tool and it's not for everyone, and it may not be a right fit for them, but we need to be able to provide them the best information they can to make the best sound decision to know, is it the right tool for them?
You're right. It's not one size fits all. I think that's the first thing you learn, and there's a lot of things going on now, Chad, that I want for this conversation to expand to, but the transition from generation to generation is going on. It's going on in my family, and this is another tool that you can use. It's for all the different things. There's a lot of people. You look at the average age of your rancher in Texas, and not only in Texas, but I guess across the United States. We're getting old, and people are fortunate to have the next generation that are interested in it, in continuing the operation. But more than likely, they don't have someone that's going to succeed them. And these people are looking at their options and going, I love this place. We're multi-generational. I don't want to see it broken up. And we can provide the tools for that. And I think that's an important thing to put out, to get out in front of people.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's it's like you said, I mean, it's planting the seed, and that's all we can do is keep planting the seed and keep in front of them and know that we're a trusted source and we're here to help them in any way we can with these families. I know, David, you guys are kind of thinking potentially as a family and utilizing the easement tool. And, how are those conversations and how is that thought process within your own family and operation?
Well, yeah, we are actively looking at conservation easements on a couple of our ranches. The fragmentation is a huge issue. I mean, it's growing at an incredible rate. I'll give you an example. My wife's family ranch, which is the first ranch that, you know, we put cattle on, that we operated. And when I married her, it was surrounded by, I would say, 3 large ranches, and they're gone now. Where in this ranch that we still have is the largest ranch in the area. And we went from having 3 neighbors to, I couldn't tell you how many neighbors we have now. And it's just, the fragmentation process is going at a faster rate than I think people realize. So
Right.
a lot of it's due to the transition. I can't bring that out enough. It's amazing to me. And I look at this for our own family's sake, and I think about my grandchildren, and then I think about, you know, hopefully we just continue to multiply, and then I'll have eventually great grandchildren. And I'd like to think that maybe one of them out of it, or all of them, would be a wonderful deal. You know, take a love to the land and want to operate it and continue like we have, my son will be doing. I would think it'd be a great deal for one of my great grandchildren to look back and go, you know, what David did back then was a really smart move. Because, you know, these things are in perpetuity and no one knows what the future is going to bring. But, you know, if you plan them and negotiate them as best you can, how can it be anything but a positive for your family? That's the way we feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that statement is so true, and I think it really takes us full circle, right? This is why you believe in TALT and why you joined our board, and more importantly, why you're leading our organization now.
Well, yeah, I agree. And you know, TALT, best of my knowledge, I don't want to brag on us too hard, but you know, we stand alone in the fact that we're about working lands. You know, we recognize how difficult, or perhaps hard, expensive it is to operate lands. And that's one of the things that I think makes us unique. That's how I got involved in the board. I have several friends on the board with like kind opinions, and it appealed to me. It appealed to me more than anything else. That TALT, I feel like TALT has the back of the landowners, and that's very important. And not trying to, you know, as we often say, we don't get into the day-to-day management of an operation. You know, that's the operator's decision to make. We're not going to go in there and tell them how to run their business. And I think that's extremely important, and people need to know that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, maybe I think, David, maybe you break that down, you know, a little bit further around TALT and, you know, for our listeners. And, you know, maybe we start about our structure and, you know, how do we get things done? You know, we're really, like you mentioned, a unique organization in that we don't have, you know, one thing, we don't have a membership. We have founding members. But I think those founding members, right, are producer, landowner focused members, and maybe kind of share some of that structure.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it's very simple. I mean, our founding members are the Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association, which I'm very active in, and then the Farm Bureau, and I'm a member of the Farm Bureau, and Texas Wildlife Association. I'm a member of TWA as well. All these are landowner-based associations, organizations that are very active. They all understand the need of conservation easements. And I think that it was a really brilliant idea to come together to form TALT. And you got to go back and you got to thank Blair and the people she worked with back then, and how they built this thing and how it has grown into what it is today. You know, I think all these organizations have the common denominator is the land, and that's the important part to remember. And I think everybody can feel a part of it with just these 3 different associations.
Yeah, I agree. And then, you know, I think the other key is, you know, we have those board members that represent those 3 organizations, and then Um, I think a couple other key components to it, David, too, which was some changes that Blair and the rest of the board was very smart about, was we have kind of that other kind of segment, or however you want to look at it, board members that have easements themselves. And some of those also in the bylaws are set out that have easements that are outside of TALT. So that brings that other perspective. And I think that really kind of helps balance the conversations and keeps us grounded in the right, in our mission of keeping working lands working. And then lastly, we have, 3 kind of board member at large, which really kind of help fill in some of those other gaps. And, a good example of that's, Dr. Lopez, Roel Lopez, and, him bringing that research and science background of all of these issues that hinder our freedom to operate in the ways we're thinking, and all of these pressures of keeping our working lands working. And I think it's just a great structure. I think one of the other things too, I think, and you mentioned, David, is, other friends and the other board members. And I think that's, I've been on lots and lots of boards that you have. And I think one of the exciting things is seeing that interaction of our board and what everybody brings, and the passion of this complex issue that we're fighting. And I think that's amazing. And we've welcomed some, new board members here in the last year and a half, that I think, kind of bring even some more perspectives and more help towards us. And any thoughts around any of
I have a lot of thoughts. Number one, like you, I've been on a lot of boards, but this is truly a working board. I'm so impressed with the current board. Well, and ever since I've been on the board, how enthusiastic people are. They show up to meetings. They get involved in the conversation. It's not one of those things where you're just a figurehead. We really don't want just a name. We want your talents. And this year we've welcomed onto the board 3 new members. We have Faith Fitzsimmons Walker, who is Blair's daughter. I mean, she probably knows more about conservation easements just through osmosis than most of us.
In between her and Joseph,
Yeah.
she brings a great perspective.
Yeah, she's really sharp. She's both her family, her mother and her father both have ranching operations. And she's in the business world, and she's very sharp and a great addition. Then you have Marshall Bowen, an attorney, who's also very familiar with conservation easements through his family's involvement. These people bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to the board, and they're both young, which I love about it. And then third is Mike Conaway, and he comes, to the board with over, I think, 16 years of, congressional experience. He chaired the House Ag Committee. He is an accountant. He understands the process, and that's, of moving things forward. And I think that's very important, that, we all, but not only just our 3 new board members, but all of our board members are the common denominator. They're connected to the land one way or the other, and they understand and agree with our mission. And I think that's very important for everybody to know that this is a passionate board, and we're moving forward and thinking out of the box and trying to help the landowner and once again have the landowners back.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And we always kind of keep going back to COVID in this past year and everything, right? And I just celebrated not too long ago, a few weeks ago, my 1-year anniversary, David, and it's just, time has flown by. But at the same time, it was kind of interesting, kind of thinking through the dynamics. Was just a few weeks ago, we had our board meeting, and it was our first face-to-face meeting since been fortunate enough to follow in behind Blair. And we had a great meeting, and I think it was definitely energizing, right, for myself and the rest of the team here at TALT, of having that interaction and just the excitement of all of us getting together.
I agree. I can remember talking to you a couple, 3 months before the board meeting, and me telling you, we need to do a face-to-face. This Zoom thing is, although it's been extremely convenient for people during the pandemic, it's just not the same as meeting face-to-face. And fortunately, our timing was good to where felt comfortable. The pandemic seems we're on the backside of this deal, and it made all the difference in the world, particularly when you have a technically challenged person as myself who doesn't do well on Zoom meetings. So yeah, it was a really good meeting. I think it's really important for the staff, and I don't want to leave the staff out without giving. I mean, we have a tremendous staff. It's a hardworking staff that they just get the job done, and I couldn't be more proud of them and working with them. It's a real exciting process.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very blessed each and every day, for the board, for the staff. It's like I've told you and I've told the staff, I've been here a year but haven't worked a day yet, and I'm looking to many, many more years just like that. We always have our challenges, but what's great is we got a family here, and our family extends beyond just our board members and our TALT staff, right? I mean, our families, all of those families that we partner with on the easements, and we have a great advisory board as well. So it's really exciting and a blessing to be part of this movement of finance solutions for our landowners. And I think from that face to face and just thinking through the challenges we have, and all these pressures we talked about of fragmentation, and we look at the population increase, or having people move to Texas at a just extremely high rate, and all of those add another layer. I think you mentioned the layer of our age and our demographics, and I mean, we can go on and on of all of these pressures, and I think the pressures are harder today than they ever have been. And I appreciate the board kind of trying to be innovative and trying to think through this. And I think there's some big news coming. And traditionally, a lot of TALT's work has, focused on advocating for working lands and actively, conserving these lands through easements. But, we're filling these pinch points and really trying to think outside the box and build more tools in the toolbox that we can help provide these families. And any thoughts around this and what we need to do and move forward?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I live this day to day, okay, operating these ranches and in the cattle industry. And, operating these ranches, maintaining these ranches is an expensive proposition. I mean, you look at what a truck costs today. You look at the insurance we have to pay. Everybody has to pay health insurance, and it's completely, out of sight. Your brush control, everything that we do on a day-to-day basis, and it can be interrupted real quick by lack of rain. It's really, I love it. I wouldn't do it anything else, but I'm telling you, running these ranches is expensive. And, if we can start looking at the other things that income centers that will help someone maintain a ranch, I think we're obligated to do that and work forward towards those type of things that help maintain and keep open lands open. So people aren't looking at, what am I going to do with this land? I can't even operate it. It's extremely tough, which kind of brings us to our next deal.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, with me coming in kind of when I have into TALT, I kind of look back and, I remember kind of thinking through it and talking to you and Charles Davidson and Blair and Steve Lewis and other board members. We have we have a lot of easements that are, 14 years, right, old, and they're going into that next generation. I think it's one less tool in the toolbox, for that next generation because they've used the easement tool. But just because you have the easement tool, as you mentioned, David, it's a business and it's trying to keep that business alive. And you know, what can we do to help empower, that next generation of keeping those operations viable? And I think it's a huge challenge, and we have to kind of keep building multiple tools and multiple things and avenues, financial resources back to these families. And we've talked about that from the board level, um, of building these and exploring new tools. What's your thoughts on developing these new tools and the board's thoughts around this?
Well, I'm assuming you're leading into the ecosystem markets. I mean, this is such a huge topic with so many facets to it. And I mean, you're one of the people that's opened my eyes to this thing and where we need to be, how we position ourselves on that. It once again, it's offering an option for landowners on other revenue centers. And as we go forward into this deal, and I know a lot of people raise an eyebrow on ecosystems and everything, and it really doesn't make any difference on what you think about it, whether you think it's real or not. This is a real deal. I mean, it's going forward at a breakneck speed. The large corporations are budgeting millions and millions of dollars to how do we, and they're not even sure how they're going to do it, but they want to cover their carbon footprint. So,
Right.
This thing starts to go forward, and we look at, well, that's how you and I got started in this conversation.
Yeah.
I was so ignorant on it.
Right.
But how do you, if you want to sell carbon credits, how do you even begin to do it? I mean, it's not like you put them, on one of the on Etsy or Craigslist or something like that. You've got to be thoughtful about that. And so, where do you go to get the information? And this has evolved over several months of you and I having our conversations. And eventually, as we got further into it, and you were very kind to educate me on a lot of this, I thought, man, we've got to form a committee on this. We have to, so we can be the trusted source, because there is a lot of I wouldn't call them a bad source, but it's not giving you the true picture of what's going on, and how you take these like I termed the environmental impact values that we do on a day-to-day basis on our conservation efforts. And I always get tickled because, if you're a successful rancher, that means you're taking care of your pastures. You're not grazing them to the dirt. You're rotating your cattle. You're doing things that obviously you could be paid for. So how do you arrive at that? How do you, when that's the big question. It's easy to say, yeah, you can get paid for that, but I mean, who's out there writing the checks? And that's what's so important. It's the devil's in the details. Is we start discovering these things and kind of put a guide together for landowners. You and I talked about doing a committee, and I thought, I think it's important. So I presented it at the past board meeting, of what do y'all think about developing a committee? And I was very pleased to see everybody thought this needed to happen. It's necessary because it's going at a very fast pace, and we need to stay ahead of it. We need to define the markets. We need to be able to understand the markets and see who the correct people are to connect with. And that's how this whole thing got started. And now I'm real excited about it because I think it's growing at an exponential rate.
Yeah, I mean, I think this space is so, interesting, and it's growing fast. And, I've been in this space, you and I have discussed for a long time, and helping, and probably way ahead of the curve, right? Um, and it's amazing in the last, I would say, 10 months, 12 months, how fast of more opportunities are out there. And I think we're going to see more and more with the administration change, and we're seeing these dynamics and more pressures on these corporations and where they're going, of more opportunities. And, it's kind of the thing too, I think, David, I've always heard, right? If you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? And I
Pretty
think
much. That's a good way to put it.
yeah, and I think that's important. And I think an important role for TALT is engaging, right? We're in the relationship business, and we want to be able to, have producers at the table, and be there, be there with us, and to be able to help engage in these discussions and help put the right system together that will help. And when we think of, I think there's a lot of great pieces to it, and that it helps really start showing all the great work that you mentioned, right? This private land stewardship and all of these things that you're putting in place of brush management, and just taking care of the cattle, and utilizing the cattle as a tool of taking care of the land, and the water resources, and et cetera, and how that can kind of roll back up to our public benefits. And I think there's just a great opportunity. I think there's, like you mentioned, these revenue centers that can come out of this.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Helps us tell our story.
I agree. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I get excited, and I get to talking fast on things like this. But as I'm going to give the listeners an idea how you and I have talked, and every question that you've answered for me has created two more questions in my head. But we've talked about stacking the values that we have on the ranch, and I did a parallel on that, and you agreed. If you recall, it's no different than capturing the value on your cattle, on your calves. Exactly. I look back at how we've done that over the years, over the past 30 years, from just simple castration of your calves versus not. We all know that's pretty elementary. That's kind of ranching 101. Then you look at source and age verification. Then you look at the all natural programs, the grass fed programs, and whatever fits you. And so many of these things, as in our operation, as we got further into it, we went, wow, this is something we're already doing, but we're not getting rewarded for it. And once again, I think people are going to see that as you stack the values, the carbon credits, the water sequestration, the biodiversity that you're responsible for on your property, and you can capture that value. But which is very easy to say, but then you go, well, wait a minute, how do you do that? And there's people not around, in these small towns, handing out dollars just because you're doing a good job. So you've got to understand what's going on here. I remember I sent an article to you. I can't remember what it was, but they were paying for carbon credits with Bitcoin. Well, I don't know a thing about Bitcoin. And you made the statement, until you can go town and buy a tractor with Bitcoin, I'm not sure I want to do that. And I thought, that's probably one of the most insightful things I've heard in quite a while. Because, there's so much stuff. I'll give you another example that excuse me, I'm probably talking fast on this.
No.
We got to talking, and I thought, well, how do you even measure the carbon that you're sequestering in your land? And so we got to talking about, well, you core it. You got to create a baseline, and you core it, okay? And you measure the carbon you have in there, and then you make a deal. Well, number one, who do you get to core it? And then we thought, well, there are probably a few companies out there to do it, but do they do it correctly? I have no idea. So then you move forward, you create that baseline, and you have so many units of carbon, whether it's tons or whatever, however they want to measure it. And then you make a deal with, one of these corporations to sequester or take care of their carbon footprint. And you've got a 5-year deal, and they'll come out in 5 years and they'll measure your carbon sequestration again. Well, what happens if you got paid for that 5 years, and at the end of the 5 years, they come out and they court again and go, oops, you didn't sequester all that. It was a bad year or a bad 3 years, just like in South Texas. We're just coming out of 3 years. So, what does that mean? You write a check back to these people? These are the type of things that we need to talk about. We need to do a lot of discovery and research on, so we can have the answers. So TALT can be the trusted source for these kind of questions. I was just building a scenario that came in my head of, I don't know the answer to these, but
Right.
I think we can find the answers.
Yeah. No, I mean, most definitely, right? I look at TALT being the same of easements or these ecosystem service markets, right? There's a thinking process, and there's a kind of a questions that you have to kind of think through your mind, and a lot of times there are new tools and there's new things that we're not aware of, and you don't know what you don't know, and sometimes at that same process you don't know what the right questions to ask. And I think that's the beauty of TALT, of being that trusted source to help producers like yourself ask these certain key questions that you may not think about. And again, we just want to be able to provide a resource and have you and other landowners kind of think through that process to make the best sound decision that meets their family's goals and objectives.
Exactly.
And more, yeah, I mean, and I think we can do that. And we can go on and on of examples, right? And I think you articulated a great example of some of those things you have to think through. And I think I think you're spot on, and and you articulated really what these ecosystem service markets, a lot of this thing isn't any different than what we do as ranchers, right? Of value added from a product. I think also the negotiation of contracts, right, is not any different than our oil and gas, agreements. It's just it's a different piece, but the key is the stacking, right? And I think the thing that frustrates me, I think a little bit, David, is the media and everything that we talk about. It's carbon, 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 carbon. And I think carbon is great, right? It's what keeps the universe going, right? It's the engine per se when we look at it from how it all the dynamics of carbon. But I think when we look at it from a payment and of revenue centers, carbon is just one piece, right? And it's I think the market itself just around carbon isn't going to be enough to make a change. But if we could stack carbon with a water credit, a biodiversity credit, being able to tie some of this land management back to our ag products from a beef or wheat or whatever we may produce on our land, I think it all starts making sense. And it starts getting us to a point that we can have enough revenue sources and keep our business afloat.
I agree. And I think, I'm pretty redundant in some of the things I say, and what I'll be redundant one more time. We need to be the trusted source for people to go to. But another thing, there's a lot of well-intentioned people out there that are misinformed. They don't own land, but they appreciate the land, but they're hearing the wrong things about, the cattle industry and production agriculture. And that's counterproductive to what we do. That's counterproductive to our mission. And right. I think people are anxious to get the facts. And so now's opportunity, particularly in the political era we have going right now. There's a lot of bad information going out there. So, people want to hear the correct story or the true story, and of what the landowners that we're associated with and the tremendous job they're doing. I think it's very important for TALT to grow its presence in that arena as well.
I agree. There's just a lot. I mean, we're learning each and every day, and this is the dynamics are picking up and changing, and I'm excited about it, and I know the board's excited, and you can tell from your passion as well as the rest of the board and the rest of the staff. I mean, we're here to help, and I just hope others see us as a resource, that we can be that trusted resource to help them navigate through this, and more tools and a lot of these layers. Any other big questions?
No, I was just going to talk about the committee we formed, and
Sure.
we had the volunteers come forward, and we got a really good committee going forward, and I'm really looking forward to the discussions and how we're going to lay this out, and where it goes from here. I really don't know which direction it's going. I know it's going to go in a positive one, because there's a real light of excitement on this. So I think it's going to be a very big learning opportunity for everybody, and I'm sure TALT is going to be sharing it as we build the narrative.
Yes, most definitely. I mean, I think we'll hear more and more on these future podcasts as we start kind of unraveling and bringing in other experts and other folks for us to have this discussion. And as you and I have talked, I mean, we need to add some of these sections on our website to be sort of that hub of information. And, maybe it's just as simple as asking, here's key questions to ask, some of those things to help folks kind of think through that thinking process. I think, it's exciting, I think, as an industry, of having these opportunities. And again, we need to make sure we're at the table, and make sure these things are guided in a positive way for us as landowners.
I agree. And I think that will be one of your charges to, on these podcasts, to bring in those experts, because a lot of them that can do it in ranch talk. So many people,
Right.
I get, my eyes glaze over, because they're speaking Greek to me. But if we get those experts in that can put it in plain terms, I think it's going to be very important as we move forward.
Yeah. Well, thanks, David. Anything else you want to share with the listeners?
Well, other than the fact that, Chad, I think you said earlier, you're looking forward to years and years with TALT, and I'm going to hold you to that. This has been an exciting few months for me as the chairman, and you and I have built a friendship, well, in a very quick fashion. And I look forward to working with you and with everybody at TALT for the next couple of years.
Well, I do as well, and I appreciate and cherish our friendship, as well as the friendship that I gain with other board members. And that's the key to success. It's about a team effort, and everyone rolling up their sleeves and getting to work, and being passionate about what we do. And I know a lot of other friends, as you have, across the state, that are ranchers and landowners, that appreciate what we do as a family, a TALT family, for them and their families. And so it's easy to come to work and look forward to work every day. I mean, that's my passion, and I'm glad to share it. And I think this is really exciting times, and I appreciate your leadership, David, and helping us move forward.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and I'm looking forward, like I said, to going forward on all this, and working with you and the other board members, and with landowners, answering questions. If I can't answer the question, I'll find someone who can, and look forward to it. I really enjoyed our conversation today, Chad.
Well, thanks again for being on, David. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. But, we'll be back. And, because we want to answer these questions, as you mentioned, and that's what we're we're really setting out to do. So, our plans are bringing in these experts, as we talked about, David, in this space to discuss, more of kind of the nuts and bolts of these ecosystem services. And, I hope listeners keep their eyes out for, those future podcasts. And, I want to give a big thanks to all of our listeners who have rated and reviewed us. Be sure to, share these podcasts with friends and, grow our network. It's the network and us communicating and having these discussions what's going to help empower all of us and to be better tomorrow than we are today. So everyone have a blessed one, and thanks again, David.
You bet. Thank you, Chad.
Beyond the Fence Line is brought to you by the Texas Agricultural Land Trust, dedicated to conserving the Texas heritage of agricultural lands, wildlife habitats, and natural resources. Find out more at txaglandtrust.org.